Hello everybody, Realm Builder Guy here, and welcome back to a new Crusader Kings 3 guide, kind of what I've done with the previous few guides, the 5 fun starts in 1066, 5 fun starts in 867, and the guide to the Mongols. I am now tackling the Holy Roman Empire, and it's going to be kind of along the same lines, where I give a little bit of historical context, just to the situation in general, as well as some interesting characters or realms that you could take in charge of, and some possible strategies here and there. But this is kind of a big beast. You know, I thought about a few other ones to start off with, but I'm kind of feeling this one also because, as some of you have asked, yes, I am German. I'm a dual citizen, American and German, but I'm not the, as I encounter here in the United States, oftentimes people say, oh, I'm German American. You know, my great-great-grandfather came from Germany. It's like, no. I'm legit German. I have an Abitur from Münster, and I've got a German passport and the whole 9 yards. So I figured I'd tackle this very German-centric topic of the Holy Roman Empire. Of course, in the 1066 start, in the 867 start, there is no Holy Roman Empire yet. And the reason why, let me get into that right away, is how did the Holy Roman Empire even come to be? Well, you can see there's France here, and there's a Holy Roman Empire. I mean, this is kind of, you have your East Frankian realms and your West Frankian realms. Yes, you had Middle Francia or Lotharingia right in the middle, but these kind of combined, so you had West and East, and there was kind of a schism there. A true final split that happened in 962. On February 2nd, 962, the Pope crowned Otto I as the first Holy Roman Empire. And the reason why is he wanted protection in Italy from everything that was happening there. The Pope was under a lot of threat. And what led to the calls for this specific, the East Frankian leader, Otto, to kind of take over this mantle is in 955, at Lechfeld, they beat the advancing Hungarians. And so apparently, supposedly, on the battlefield, he was already being called emperor by the troops, and he was the most powerful Germanic ruler, and so in this region right here. And so the Pope said, hey, you can be the emperor now. Please protect me. And Otto just did that, actually. Moved into northern Italy and conquered all of this stuff. And what was previously the kingdom of Lombardia, the Lombards kind of subjugated them, and that became part of what essentially is the Holy Roman Empire. And then the next big one was in 1018, the Kingdom of Burgundy, which is down right in here. Also, I guess, abdicated to the descendants of Otto, at which point it was, I believe, Heinrich II. And there was no heir apparent to the Burgundian king. And so it went somehow through some corners and lines of successions and here and there to Heinrich. And so then these lands also joined the Holy Roman Empire. Now, the Holy Roman Empire at this time in 1066 is in a very, very powerful position. But you still have, of course, up here, you've got these, heathens, the non-Christian faith believers here. You've got a Danish kingdom in the north, Poland, Hungary, Croatia here, the Italian states down here. Of course, the forever adversary France, or West Francia at some point, to the west. Now, there is one interesting thing about the Holy Roman Empire, and that is, of course, the succession law. It is a princely elective succession law, as it's titled here in Crusader Kings 3. And let me just read from the CK3 wiki page on what that means. So the emperor and the 7 prince electors can nominate an heir from amongst themselves, any legitimate children and siblings of the ruler, as well as any other major de jure vassal of the empire. If an historical elector title is held by infidels or does not exist, another de jure vassal will take its place. This succession law places a significant importance on faith and piety. So, let's take a look at who is the current emperor, and that is Kaiser Heinrich IV, Zalian. And I kind of talk about them in the 5 Fun Starts in 867. You can start as really one county, Zalia, and see if you can replicate what they did. And Heinrich IV was a very powerful, but didn't lack controversy. Now, what's interesting here is he holds titles to a bunch of counties, as well as East Franconian Duchy and West Franconian Duchy, and of course, the Holy Roman Empire. He does not have any kingdoms. Now, historically, he actually only ascended to become emperor, I believe, in, let me check here, 1084. And he had multiple king titles. He had Germany, Italy, and Burgundy. You can create these if you have enough money. I think creating the kingdom title of Germany is 500 gold. Everything else he has. Now, he is up for election. And he currently, or basically it's an elective period for the next heir, the next one to take over. And like I read out, it can be pretty much anybody here in the Holy Roman Empire, and including an heir of his. Now, the problem is he has no heir that is eligible. He has his sister, but he has no children yet. He's only 16. He is married, but he has no children yet. If he has children, then, of course, odds are he'll put them forward and then try to sway the electors through getting hooks and favors. You can force them to vote for whoever you want to have as heir. And, of course, just being nice and stuff like that. At the start of the game, the person with the most power is out of the house Babenberg, and that's Ernst, the Duke of Austria. He's very popular. Oftentimes I see him take over after Heinrich, but that's really the strategy here, and that's the situation he's in at 16 with no children yet. He needs to get some kids so he can put them forward as heirs. But that is that on this. Now let's delve into the Holy Roman Empire, and the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to highlight a few of the duchies, and then highlight a few of the counts, or counties. Also a countess in there. The reason why I'm not going into everybody, because otherwise this video is just going to take way, way, way too long. And these are just some of the interesting ones. Now, there are a ton of other interesting ones out there, but I feel like these are some of the most interesting ones. So, again, if you want to start as the emperor, get some kids and play the elector game. But now let's dive into the Holy Roman Empire and look at some of the interesting dukes. So the first one we're going to look at here is Angria. In Germany, it would be Engon, which was actually just a small part up north. I'm not really too happy with it being called this. It really should be Saxony. This is the area where the previous kingdoms of Saxony were located. Yes, historically it kind of migrated down into this area here where you've got Lausitz and Meissen and Magdeburg. But it really, I'll be honest, I'd prefer it to be called Saxony at this point, but it is what it is. So, who is the head here? So that is Duke Adolf of Angria, and he's of House Billung. Now, the Billung, they were the lords of Saxony since the 9th century and really kind of built that power base. His son was actually the last, historical Otto's son was the last member of the dynasty. You can see here, you've got Count Hermann of Lüneburg. Those are siblings, but here's his child, and that's Count Magnus of Kassel. And he's the heir, and he was the last in the line. You see, there are no other kids here. So it could. Now, he is godless and craven, and I've loaded this a few times, and yes, he is ill in August, which is nice, and adequate bargainer, but he starts off ill, so this is I mean, it's got its challenges for sure, but at least you already have an heir. He is married to, actually, interesting thing is, now you can see he's got a ton of claims. of all these different counties up in the north here. And the interesting thing is also his wife right here. Ulfhild, Olavsdotter, is a Yngling. So this is the royal house of Norway. Historically, she is a daughter of the king of Norway, but she also has relatives in other places, including the former king of Sweden is her grandfather, and her brother is the former king of Denmark. So she has claims a bunch in Sweden, including the Kingdom of Sweden. So that's an interesting kind of combination there. So this would be one to take a look at and see if you can expand. Now, the most natural expansion for him is to try to gobble up these guys right here. So these are the non-Christian, the pagan neighbors, Slavic neighbors. So that's the most natural place to expand into, and maybe try to forge an alliance with Denmark, and then maybe press your wife's claims for Sweden. So next on the list, of course, is a very, very powerful one that you see oftentimes going independent, even though after patch 1.1, less so, and that is right over here in Bohemia. We've got Duke Vratislav II, Přemyslit. Now, he actually gets granted the Kingdom of Bohemia, still as part of the Holy Roman Empire, by his friend, who was Emperor Heinrich IV in 1085. He's very, very close with the emperor, and he always had inner and outer conflicts. One with his brothers, especially Otto of Olomouc, and then his Jaromir of Opava, and then Konrad of Brno. But really, these guys out here, they were always an issue, in Otto the Handsome especially. One of them, I don't remember which one, I think it was Otto, he actually made a bishop, kind of forcing him to take the cloth. So you may want to keep that in mind. Now, he's very, very good. I mean, he's a holy warrior, skilled tactician. He has these right off the bat every time I've loaded this. He does have claims as well on a few counties in Bohemia. But here, again, another interesting one is his marriage. He is married, and of course there goes my phone, very professional. He is married to a Piast, so from Poland. And as such, look at all these wonderful, beautiful Polish claims, including the Duchy of Greater Poland and the Duchy of Lesser Poland. So something to think about and press. Now, he always tried, through that marriage, the goal was to get closer with Poland, have closer ties. But Poland never had wanted anything to do with him, and there was actually constant warfare. The emperor at some point gave him a title of King of Poland, even though there was no legal, I guess, power behind that, given that Poland was not part of the HRE. It was more symbolic as a thank you for all of his great work. But the strategy here for him is keep an eye on Hungary, keep an eye on Austria and Steiermark to the south, where he did expand into at times, and of course Poland up here. The most natural one for me would be to expand into Poland, especially given your wife's claims. He is only 34 years old, so he still has plenty of time left. You've got a whole bunch of children, and the primary heir, though, is the brother. So let's just keep that in mind. Next up, we're going right up here to Lausitz. And this is an interesting one. So this is House Wettin. Now, it is one of the oldest noble houses and ruled in this region for over 1,000 years until the year 1918. And in fact, it is still around today. Queen Elizabeth of England and King Philippe of Belgium are all descendants of the House Wettin. So they are only one of 3 existing German noble houses that was founded before the year 1000. He's one of the Duke Dado, who's Dado II, is one of the early Wettins. There aren't a ton of them out there that are landed. The big one here is actually your brother, who is the Prince Bishop Friedrich of Münster. also have Timo Wettin, who's a marshal for your other brother. Now, you'd like to bring Timo into court. He does become a count historically, so that might be something to keep an eye on there. The other thing got to look at here is the fact that he has a claim on the Duchy of Meissen right next to it, which they do eventually take control over. Historically, he was a major adversary and thorn of the side of Heinrich IV, but right now, obviously, everything's looking pretty good there. And his daughter, if we can find her here, is the Duchess Adelheit of Austria. So she is married to Ernst Babenberg of Austria, who is one of the most popular rulers amongst all the electors for the Holy Roman Empire to become the next emperor. So there's a ton of stuff going on. What I like about this, it's a duke, but he doesn't have a ton of land. He's kind of in a difficult position with Poland right here. You've got the pagans to the north and the Angrians right here. And then, of course, the claim on Meissen, more powerful neighbor. I mean, you look at that at over 1,100 soldiers. You only have 763. But you're allied with Austria with an unpressed claim on the duchy. So you can definitely move forward to that. Continue, maybe try to improve relations with your more powerful neighbors. You do have a few other kids here that you can try to ally with before you take on Meissen, because you definitely need more power. But that is an absolute way I would go, is look at expanding into Meissen, connect your territories. And another area you could take a look at is obviously, like I mentioned before for Angria, is to look at the pagans to the north before you maybe look at anything in your neighborhood. And, maybe push for your son-in-law to become the next emperor of the HRE. So, moving on, I've got a lot of notes here to get through. We're going to scoot all the way over here, and we're going to go to Lower Lorraine. Now, Lorraine in German is called Lothringen, named after Lothar, Lotharingia. So, a Carling there. And the head here, now these are the Wiegeriche. Now, the Wiegeriche are a house that in a way still exists today. The House Salm still exists today, and they are a branch of the Wiegeriche. And now he had a brother. We can find him here. Where is he? Right here. Pope Stephanos the 8th. So his brother was Pope at one point. So just kind of throw that out there. He has a claim on Upper Lorraine, and he's not a bad guy to start with, but he's already 63. The good thing is a bunch of kids. His wife, on the other hand, very interesting. She is also Wiegeriche, but she has claims also on Upper Lorraine as well as Swabia, Schwaben. And we will get to Schwaben or Swabia here very, very shortly. So again, this is an interesting one, kind of a broken up land. They did eventually take over Luxembourg. So in my opinion, that's your most natural play. Or moving north into the Duchy of Holland as well to kind of bring that all under one nice non-border gore area. And then pressing the claim and maybe attacking Upper Lorraine as well. You have an ally here in Ansbach, so you can kind of attack Upper Lorraine from two sides. Again, an interesting one with a few claims, with some interesting ways of possibly playing it. Now we're going to move right to his adversary in Upper Lorraine, Duke Gerhart of House Châtenois. Now the House Châtenois is also known as the House Elsass. It still exists to this day. Historically, he was very close with Heinrich. He's not necessarily considered a legitimate ruler for a lot of people here. Well, neither is Gottfried. But the interesting here is to defend yourself against Lower Lorraine as well as Swabia to your south. So it's a difficult position, and see if you can get Châtenois, the house, to continue to live on. The nice thing you have, you're superior in strength to the Lower Lorraine. So maybe look at adding Luxembourg. Mine's not so much. It's a prince-bishopric. But adding Luxembourg to your realm, and then attacking Lower Lorraine from a position of strength before they come after you. And then maybe also, you've got Strasbourg here as well. You can maybe try to gobble them up at the same time. Now, moving to the south, we are going to go to Swabia. Now, I did mention a count in Swabia once before, and that is, of course, right down here in Ravensburg. Hohenstaufen is definitely one. He is in my 5 fun starts in 1066, so check that out. I'm not going to talk about him today. Even when we talk about counts a little bit later in the video, I'm not really going to talk about him. Now, Swabia. So you've got this Duke Rudolf, Haus Rheinfelden. He is, historically speaking, a very, very intriguing character. But before I get into that, his wife is of House Savoy, who, of course, Savoy eventually become kings of Italy, etc., etc. She has a ton of claims down in Italy, including the Duchy of Savoy. So, Rudolf. Interesting thing about him, he was a major adversary to the emperor. In the beginning, he was still his friend and supported him in some wars against the Saxon princes, but then completely turned on him and always worked against everyone from House Salian. In fact, he was voted a Gegenkönig, so I guess an opposing king of Germany, after the Pope had excommunicated Heinrich IV. And the way he then became king, because, the people who didn't like Heinrich basically looked at the situation and said, hey, we need somebody else. Here's this guy who we don't really know his heritage. Some claim he's descendant from the Burgundian throne, but, nobody can really find anything there. And he paid people off to vote for him. Really, he's overly ambitious, wanted to get in power, got in power, but at the end of the day, it went nowhere. Heinrich solidified his power again, and that was the end of these kind of opposition kings, the Gegenkönige. So maybe you can keep Rheinfelden and keep this upstart duke in power. As you can see, he's a bold antagonist, and he definitely was that historically. Now, moving to his neighbor, right here in Bavaria, a big, powerful duchy, and you've got Otto II Nordheim. Now, Nordheim is not a major house, and it fades from significant power pretty much after Otto. The Welfs take over, and then Wittelsbach takes over. And I'm going to talk about Wittelsbach in a little bit. He was one of the people that supported Rudolf of Swabia that we just talked about to become the Gegenkönig to Heinrich. So that's something to keep in mind there. And then here, his wife, whose house Etzonen, she has a ton of claims further up north, including the Duchy of Swabia. So maybe he doesn't become Rudolf's buddy. Instead, try to expand into here. Bavaria, what's your play? It's very simple. You've got Nordgau, Salzburg, Steiermark, Austria, and Corinthia or Kärnten. This is your natural play, is to expand into here. No doubt about that. If you want to keep Nordheim alive, they didn't last very long. He's a resentful craven, so keep that in mind. But a very interesting one. Bavaria can be an absolute powerhouse for anybody that takes over. So now let's go to Austria, kind of a natural place for Bavaria to expand into. But Duke Ernst, he is very popular, like I mentioned, to try to become the Holy Roman Emperor. Now, the Babenbergs were the Austrian rulers for about 300 years until 1278, when one of Ernst's descendants died in battle. There were no heirs apparent, so the lands in 1278 were inherited by this minor house some people may have heard of, called Habsburg. That's right, 1278 is when the Habsburgers took over for the Babenbergs, and, well, the rest is history. They became one of the most powerful, influential, royal families in world history. Now, Ernst had the nickname historically as the Brave. He died in battle as ally of the emperor. And the Babenbergs, after Ernst, his son, his grandson, they were all famous crusaders. And actually, in 1278, what happened is one of his sons died on crusade, or grandsons, I think, or great-grandchildren, I can't remember, but died on crusade, and that's what led to all of that. Now, he has a ton of claims in counties in Austria and outside of it, including some French bishoprics, but very interesting is the Duchy of Steiermark itself. So that's the de jure duchy right here. That's the natural place to expand to. He is allied with Ditto from Lausitz, but they're pretty far away. Get close with Bohemia and Hungary. That would be, maybe one internal and one external support, because the Bavarians are going to push. Bohemians are probably going to push, but you're in no position to take them on. This is an interesting one to play because it's a pretty small duchy, but you could become Holy Roman Emperor pretty quickly if you play that game. And definitely look at moving into Steiermark and maybe building historical Austria and then taking over the Hungarians as well. Now, moving here to Corinthia, to Kärnten, you have Duke Berthold of House Zeringen. He's basically the start of the House Zeringen. They didn't last super long. But from the House Zeringen came the House Baden, which ruled kind of in this area of Swabia eventually. He does have a claim here for Kärnten itself, a bunch of titles. Now, historically, they came from here in the Breisgau. That's where the Zeringa originally came from. But due to good service, he was actually given the areas of Kärnten and Verona. So this is a very split up, very difficult start as a duchy, because a lot of people are going to want your lands, and none of them are really connected. The reason why he was given these lands in basically Austria and northern Italy is because he didn't challenge Rudolf to the throne of Swabia, and this kind of a thank you, he was given that. Now, I am going to refrain from talking a lot about these northern Italians in the Piedmont, Lombardy, and Tuscany. I will acknowledge them that they are there. Of course, in Piedmont, you have Duke Pia of Piedmont of the House Savoy, so the Piedmont Savoy. In Lombardy, you have Alberto Azzo of the Obertenghi, and in Tuscany, you have the famous Duchess Matilda, whose mother is the Duchess of Lower Lorraine. So that's something to keep in mind there. That's kind of an interesting one. But I'm going to do a separate guide on the Italian states in both 1066 and 867. But I do want to mention Lombardy. And in the House Obertenghi, specifically this guy right here, Welf. So he is currently in Regensburg, in Duke Otto's court. He is allied here with Bavaria. Now, why is this guy so interesting? You can tell it's a different house. Well, he starts the youngest branch, the Jungwelfen, as we call it in German, the House Welf Este, because his father founds the Este house, which lasted until the 19th century. And his son founds the Welf dynasty. Now, they were the ones who took over for Nordheim in Bavaria. And you can see right now, he is on Duke Otto's court. So keep that in mind. In Bavaria. They usurp the Bavarian throne, take over from the Nordheims, but eventually get pushed out of there by the Wittelsbacher. But they take over Braunschweig and actually rule Braunschweig or Brunswick, Hanover, until 1918. And this branch of the Welf dynasty was also known as House Hanover for a while, and had a few King Georges of England. And the last Welf Este descendant to sit the English throne was Queen Victoria. So, an interesting one there. He has a ton of claims, obviously Lombardy, Zurich, Como, Pavia, and his wife is a Nordheim. So, that's something to keep in mind there. The other interesting thing is his mother has claims in France. And of course, his father has a claim internally in Italy. So this guy here, Welf, could become a mega powerful character in here after his father passes. So that's who I wanted to focus in on there. Now, we've done the interesting duchies. Now let's take a look at some interesting counts. All right, we are here with Count Ekbat of Halberstadt from the house Brunonen. So, historically speaking, the Brunonen house didn't last very long. I think it was only about a century or two. But what was interesting was he was given the duchy or the Markgrafschaft of Meissen by the emperor because he got along really well with him. What makes this interesting for me is maybe you can reverse the course of history here, but the other thing is he's got a ton of claims up here. I mean, you've got Frisia, Ducum, Brunswick itself, Minden, Merseburg, and Mansfeld. So a lot of your neighbors you have claims on to press and go after, and maybe, just maybe, House Brunonen, which did exist and did for a short time get some power within the empire, can expand beyond that and do better than his historical counterparts. Next up, we are moving all the way over here, and we are going to go to Hainaut. And the Countess Richilde Regnadochter of Hainaut. Interesting woman. So she is of the Regina family. She, in her second marriage, married into the House of Flanders. So she has a claim in Brabant, right next to it. But her husband, that's right, House Flandern, he has claims, excuse me, for the Duchy of Flanders, as well as the counties within. So you've got a lot of interesting claims there. And the brother is actually down here in France. So Rogier of Châlons. He actually, I believe, was bishop in Châlons in real life. So, sorry, this is her son, not brother. Apologies there. So the son is the heir and is Count of Châlons. So on her passing, the Count of Châlons would actually get Hainaut as well. So you'd have a foot in both France and the Holy Roman Empire. Now, historically, what's interesting with her is, of course, she was married to Count Budvainson, who then inherits Flanders, the wealthiest duchy in France. Well, when her husband died, she became regent of Flanders, and actually the King of France then appointed her as, I guess, the Duchess of Flanders, but was pushed out by her brother-in-law, who was like, nah, I'm not having this. She eventually went back to Hainaut, where then the then emperor turned it into a prince-bishopric, and she ended her days in an abbey. Very tragic, but this is a woman who I think, she's overseer, flexible leader. This is a very good character to start with because you have a son who can inherit and continue with basically, like I said, feet in both France and the Holy Roman Empire, which can make it interesting. Plus, you will eventually bop over here to Flanders. Of course, this son is from a first marriage, so he has no claims on Flanders. He does have claims on the county of Cambrai and Hainaut, so he can inherit there as well. So this is another interesting count to talk about. Now, I did mention, like I said, Hohenzollern before, who's sitting here. If you want to find out more about that, go to the 5 Fun Starts in 1066. Now we're going to move just south of here and to Aargau, to Count Werner of Habsburg. Now he has claims up north here in Upper Lorraine. He is, now everybody knows the Habsburg story in the sense of they became the rulers of Austria in 1278 and became one of the most influential royal dynasties in world history. And even though historically it kind of started before Vienna, Vienna was really the first truly landed count, the first landed noble of the House Habsburg. They did come out of Aargau. So this is your chance to establish a house which is considered obscure at this point and build them into a powerhouse. Now we're going to move over here to Besançon to Count Guillaume. Now, Guillaume, or William of Besançon, is of House Ivrea. Ivrea also is a house in France. What's interesting here, okay, they're allied with Count Louis of Zundgau, who's next door in Swabia. But what's interesting, he has a claim, unpressed, on the Duchy of Normandy. So that's an interesting one. And his wife has claims to the north in Upper Lorraine. So you start off as a pretty powerful count. I mean, you've got a three county count with claims on Normandy and wife's claims on Upper Lorraine. Yes, he's 49 years old, but you got a ton of kids. So even when he passes, it's not over by a long shot. Here the play is, of course, press your claims for Upper Lorraine, build kind of an alliance of counts, and maybe Swabia as well to push here. Upper Lorraine, a lot of people are gunning for you. The other one is, of course, you could expand here into Neuchâtel or Bern or Geneva, right next door relatively simply, and maybe even take over the Habsburg lands. And, of course, to the south, you have House Forêt in Lyon as well. So there's a lot of options for growth here, just attacking counts and, you know, kind of leaving everything else out. Now, one thing I have noticed a lot of times in some of my playthroughs, Geneva and Bern are given to Piedmont quite often, very early, by the Emperor. So just keep an eye on that. Now, for the final one that I want to focus on is really one that I love, that got added in the 1.1 patch, is in Bavaria, in Rothenburg. That is Count Otto of House Wittelsbach. Now, the reason why this is so interesting, now, of course, it's an obscure house at this point. He's really the first. He has high domain limit. You can see he's a forest fighter. I mean, he's a skilled tactician. He only has the one title, so it's a one-county count. But the Wittelsbach family is one of the most impressive in world history. They still exist today. And they ruled Bavaria for over 700 years. So Bavaria and the Palatinate, or the Pfalz, which is right in over here. They actually took over in 1180 after the Welf dynasty moved out of Bavaria and moved up to Braunschweig and Hanover and that whole Niedersachsen these days. And they took over Bavaria in 1180 and ruled there until after World War I in 1918. They are actually a branch of the Luit-Poldinger, which is from King, I think it's King or Duke, Luitpold of Bavaria. So they are a true Bavarian house. This is their home. Bavaria is their home, and that's where they want to stay. The Wittelsbachs, at some point or another throughout history, aside from eventually becoming kings of Bavaria, they had kings in Hungary, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Greece, and Bohemia. This is one of the most influential German noble houses in history. You start in a very bad position within a powerful duchy with a relatively weak duke at the head, knowing that the Welfs are already kind of sniffing around. So it's a very interesting start. And obviously you'll want to start by, you know, gobbling up some of your neighbors, because you need to get a bigger power base before you can even think of taking on the Bavarians themselves, and Nordheim, and kind of usurping the throne and coming to power as a Wittelsbach, and then expanding the Bavarian holdings down here. This, to me, personally, is the one that I would like to do the most. Starting is the Wittensbach. There are a bunch of here that I talked about that would be a lot of fun, but in my opinion, this would be one of the most fun ones out there. So there you have it. This is my guide to the Holy Roman Empire. Yes, it's pretty long. I'm looking at my recording right now, and yeah, it's, you know, it's a long one, and I apologize for that, but there's so much to get into here with the HRE. So many different ways you can play within the HRE and then take the HRE if you become emperor. I hope you enjoyed this rather long guide. If you did, please hit that like button. Subscribe if you're new to not miss anything here on the channel. And until next time, I'm Realm Builder Guy, and I will talk to you soon.